planted on the shores of today, never knowing where life will lead, nor what progress we will make. We stand at this place with the unknown future before us. In our heart of hearts, we have made up in our minds that we are going to do something to make today better than yesterday. For as much as we look back on the glories of our yesterdays, we must admit that even in 2020, there were some things about yesterday that were not so good. Yesterday, there were days of laughter, but we also had days when tears clouded our vision. Yesterday, there were heartaches that upset the landscape of our lives. Yesterday, there were people whose deeds devastated us and whose words cut our hearts into pieces. Yesterday, there were pains that plummeted us, predicaments that puzzled us, mishaps that mesmerized us, and circumstances that circumvented our happiness. With all of these things, with all of the things that happened on yesterday, all of us would like to bring closure to many of the events of the past. We do not want the bad boys and bad girls of yesterday hounding us today. We do not want the pains of yesterday to dog us out on today. If we would really admit it, what we really desire is closure. Closure. For one of the greatest predicaments to face is not being able to close some matter of the past. The worst kind of torment is not being able to resolve some matter of days gone by. When we look across the fence into the lives of others, we wonder what is wrong with them. We feel like the problem is some matter related to today, but if the truth is revealed, many persons are suffering for a deeper reason. Such people are suffering not because of today, but because of yesterday. Nobody needs to be beat up by yesterday, for it is only a faint fog behind us. Yesterday is only a memory of what already has taken place. The fact of the matter is that if you cannot close some things that happened yesterday, you cannot really get on with today. If you cannot close your yesterday, you certainly will not be able to open your tomorrow. You will be like the hapless and hopeless, many of whom are frozen, stranded in time because they have not had closure to the past. They are still dealing with the baggage of history, so they cannot march into their destiny. They are so caught up in what already has happened, they cannot begin to see what is about to happen. I'm going somewhere this morning. It is amazing how God opens revelations through the Word of God. Like in this familiar Old Testament story that Pharaoh read this morning about the children of Israel. I've always been fascinated by their story because in many ways it parallels the story of black people in this country. The twists and turns of their story make it one that never gets boring no matter how many times you read it. In Exodus chapter 14, the Israelites had arrived at the Red Sea. God had opened the way before them. There was, however, one problem. Pharaoh and his troops were in hot pursuit. God's chosen were stranded between dilemma and deliverance. They were stuck between what was and what is to be. In their desperation, many of them began to cry out, "Were there not enough graves in Egypt that you brought us out here to die under the chariot wheels of our former taskmasters?" God then called Moses into emergency executive vestry meeting and laid out the plan. Before the people knew it, Moses was climbing up on the rock. And instead of answering their complaints, instead of counteracting their argument, Moses stood and gave a command, wrapped up in a promise. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. In this episode, not only was the promise of the future revealed, but also the never-ending presence of the past. Hear me. Pharaoh and all of Egypt represented Israel's past. And the land beyond the Red Sea represented their future. If they were going to seize their future, they had to bring closure to their past. In order to move through the open door of what was ahead, they had to close down what was behind. I'm helping somebody this morning. If Pharaoh and Egypt and the past kept coming up, they could never move into the place where God wanted them to be. In order to get to the new place, the old place has to be dealt with. There has to be closure. Oh, beloved, many people are in the same position today that Israel was in then. They have a bright and glorious future before them, but they remain chained to the past. Many a marriage is bogged down because of something in its yesterday. Many churches cannot move into the new thing that God promised to do because they are cramped by the struggles of yesterday. Many folks are stuck in the past because of their unforgiveness. And this is at the crux of Peter's question to Jesus as we experienced it in Matthew's Gospel. "Lord, if a member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times? Jesus said to him, "Not 7 times, but I tell you, 77 times. In other words, forgiveness must be a lifestyle. Forgiveness must be persistently practiced. Without the persistent practice of forgiveness, there can be no closure. In order to move into tomorrow, there has to be closure on the past." There are some things that spring out of this story that I believe, beloved, might help us to gain closure on the past so we can move on. Do not forget the premise of this argument. Pharaoh represents the past. Beyond the Red Sea represents the destiny that has been divinely set for Israel. In order to move into their tomorrow, there had to be a closure on their past. Let's look at it for a moment. First, it seems like We always encounter our past when we get ready to move toward our future. Here, the children of Israel were on their way to the promised land. They had been set free. They had marched out of Egypt in a processional of victory. They were inching ever forward toward the place where they would live a better life. They would live in a house that they did not build. They would eat from trees they did not plant. All that they needed would be in their new homeland, but just when their future seemed to be within reach, they looked behind them and the past was gaining on them fast. Well, this is always the case. It always seems to be the case. The past always seems to lie dormant, like a sleeping lion. The past seems to be at rest. As long as you keep a backward focus, the past keeps on sleeping. As long as you stay put and do not move forward, you never have to encounter the tragedies of yesterday. You never have to encounter the horrors of your history. But just as soon as you make up your mind to move into your tomorrow, you will see your past moving toward you with a vengeance. Things you thought were gone rear their ugly heads once again. You get ready to open the door to your future, but the door will not open because you have to keep on dealing with the past. Even the enemy knows that if you keep dealing with yesterday long enough, you will become afraid to move into your future. The children of Israel had started to believe that the Pharaoh of their past was more than a faint notion, was no more than a faint notion, rather, on the pages of their history. Merely a footnote, they thought, to their years of slavery and struggle, but what better way to keep them from moving forward? Just let them keep on dealing with the issues of their past. It would take their nerve away. It would take their will away, their trust away, their optimism away, and ultimately it would take their destiny away. I say this morning that some of you are afraid of the future because matters of the past keep coming at you. But God has opened up the way so that you can move to your divinely designed place. So when you have to encounter the past, I say this morning, do not let it distract you, because if God has opened the way, it has been done so that you might move into your future. The second thing that seems a little strange if you read the text closely is that it seemed like the past and the future were on the same path. They were on their way, crossing the Red Sea. God swung open before them a path to victory. With the blast of God's nostrils and the might of divine will, the Red Sea, which was a barrier to hem them in, became a highway to bring them out. But as they got to the other side, they looked back. And on the same path behind them, they saw the past gaining on them. Why did it seem like God would allow the victory of their tomorrow and the agents of their yesterday to be on the same path? I realize that the reason why you often can look back down the same path and see the past and the future is that a glance at what was ought to motivate you to move forward into what can be. When you look over your shoulder and see what you have been through, that ought to give you a reason to move ahead. When you look back and see the negative and nasty things that you had to deal with yesterday, that glimpse makes you hungry for tomorrow. You hurry because you don't want to relive that pain. You don't want to relive that tragedy. So when you see your past behind you, and then we ought to move with determination into the place that God has set in front of us. And then the final point to the story, then I'm going to let you go. I know this is supposed to be like an 8 o'clock service, a short service, get you out of here. Some of y'all got greens on the stove and all that kind of stuff. The final point is that God will bring closure to your past. I'm a witness that God will never allow your past to catch up with your progress. The Lord has a way of bringing closure to your past. Look at Israel. Pharaoh's army was gaining on them. They had reached the other side, but the army was still coming. Their hopes were vanishing. The victory seemed to be slipping through their fingers. The gap between them seemed to be closing. The past was gaining on them. Oh, but God is an excellent God. The Lord will never allow your used-to-be's to gain victory over your about-to-be's. Preach, boy. Their used-to-be's wanted to intimidate them, but their about-to-be's encouraged them. Their used-to-be's wanted to scare them, but their about-to-be's gave them strength. Their used-to-be's wanted to bring up their pain and predicament, but their about-to-be's wanted them to see their deliverance. Their used-to-be's wanted them to remember their past, but their about-to-be's wanted to show them their future. Pharaoh did not have enough sense to realize that if God opened up the Red Sea for Israel, God could close it up once the people had reached safety. God shut down the past. God closed the matter by closing the Red Sea. Before bondage could reclaim Israel, the Lord closed the Red Sea, and Pharaoh's army, as Pharaoh told us this morning, drowned. But you know what? Here's one thing I noticed here as I read further. Pharaoh did not drown with them. Why was Pharaoh kept alive? Pharaoh was the ruler, the potentate, the authority. Why was he kept alive? I begin to think about it. I believe God used Pharaoh to teach us something. God does not always eliminate every part of our past. But God does strip the power from the past so that it can no longer have power over us. The symbol of the past can be there, but the power of the past is gone. Regardless of the past, the symbol may remain. But hear me, beloved, this morning, the power over you is gone. That's why this morning I believe you can sing, I'm pressing on the other way. New heights I'm gaining every day. Still praying as I'm on